SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Mid-Delta Auction Company is holding a spring equipment auction Thursday, March the 20th from their location across from Cannon Motors in Greenwood. Visit mdauction.com for more information. That's mdauction.com. We'll see you there.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy.
Well, we got us an old-fashioned showdown in the Mississippi State Capitol concerning taxes. We got a revised House measure, and we got a new Senate measure. This all happened when me and you were off the air yesterday. Geez, gave us plenty to talk about. There's no doubt. In fact, we're going to have Senator Josh Harkins. He, of course, chairs the Senate Finance Committee. He's the tax man over there in the Senate. He's coming on at 12:05 to unpack it all for us. I'm still not sure this is going anywhere, honestly. I just feel like both sides are a bit dug in on kind of their deal killer features, if you will. The Speaker of the House Jason White released yesterday a piece of communications that informs us of the revised draft of HB 1. And what they're doing here is making a few changes, if you will, that I think we need to pass on to you. The first is one that deals, of course, with the elimination of the income tax. That's the primary goal of HB 1. The Speaker's made that clear. The Governor as well has made clear that is his top priority, eliminating the tax on work as quickly and responsibly as possible, according to the Speaker. So the income tax rates will be cut from 4% to 3.5% in 2027, and then progressively in decrements to complete the elimination by 2037. So over a 10-year period of time, we'll cut the 3.5% rate down to zero. That is a bit different than the original bill, which would have cut the rate to 3% in 2027 and then progressively in increments to 2037. So the difference there, if you caught that, was that we're going from 4 in 26 to 3.5 in 27 under this new revised draft, as opposed to 4 to 3% in 2027 under the original HB 1. But the same structure stays in place of phasing out the income tax, be it the 3% effective in 2027 per the original legislation, or the 3.5%, which is what this new draft provides for, specifies. Either way, it's 10 years after 27. Keep in mind that we're still in the process of reducing income taxes based on legislation passed in 2022. In 2022, we had a 4% bracket, all income between $5,000 and $10,000, and then all income over $10,000, taxable income, we should point out. That's after deductions and exemptions. Ed taxed at 5% over $10,000. So in 23, we got rid of the 4% bracket. And then in 24, we took the 5 to 4.7. 25, we're now under 4.4. You should, as a result, you should have seen the taxes. If your pay's level, let's say the last pay period in 24 versus the first pay period in 25, you should have seen state withholding, provided your income was level over that period. You should have seen the state withholding on your paycheck decrease a tad because the rate went from 4.47 in 24 to 4.4 in 25. Next year it will fall further to 4, and that's where it terminates under present legislation. The new House bill takes it then to 3.5 and then phases it out over 10 years to 0. Sales tax on groceries, another major feature of this plan from the House, would go from 7 to 5% immediately. Now, recall that the original House bill was a little different in that it was going to take it from 7 to 5 in 26 and then down actually 7 to 6 in 26, and then down to 4 over 10 years. Talking about sales tax on groceries. So this replaces that old approach to reduce the grocery tax, sales tax on groceries, to 5%, effective this year. Over 2 years, general sales taxes would increase from 7 to 8%. This revenue would distribute $48 million to the State Aid Road Fund. The remaining funds stay in the general fund. This is a departure from the original bill, which would have increased general sales taxes from 7 to 8.5%, with the 1.5% additional new layer staying with the city or county in which the transaction occurred. That's because the original bill would have ended the current diversion of sales taxes. When you buy something now at the store, you pay the 7%. 18.5% of that 7% goes back, is diverted back to municipalities. This is a change, significant change in that. So the diversion stays in place just like it is. That means the House plan essentially has less money available to offset the decrease in the income tax. And then, not included in the original bill, which is something that I discussed with the Speaker and Chairman Trey Lamar when the legislation was first introduced offline, had this discussion, and that's use tax. Use tax is essentially sales taxes on everything you buy from out-of-state sellers. You go to Amazon, you buy something. I think that's probably what most folks are familiar with. You're going to see the standard sales taxes in the state of Mississippi added onto your purchase. The original House bill would not have added the new 1.5% increase in sales tax. This bill does, except it's not 1.5. As we stated earlier, it's 1%. In addition, the money, this is interesting twist here, the money collected from that, 1% new use tax going from 7 to 8 when you buy at Amazon, for example, is going to be used for the Homestead Exemption Reimbursement Fund. That's been around a while, and that is used to reimburse those entities that receive ad valorem taxes, your property taxes. When you pay your property taxes, you look at your property tax bill, you'll see school district, city, and county. Mainly school district and county, the way it's distributed, divided. Well, this actually will create, this bill, a new $200 a year annual credit to those over the age of 65. They already get a credit if you're over 65 for so-called additional homestead exemption to lower your property taxes just because of your age. Then this is a fairly significant change. The excise tax on fuel is going to increase 5 cents a year for 3 years. That's a 15-cent new tax on fuel. The original House bill contemplated a 5% sales tax on fuel. That was a new form of taxation on fuel to drive more revenues to the Department of Transportation for roads and bridges. So the House has changed that approach from a sales tax to an additional amount of excise taxes. That would put the excise tax in the state of Mississippi at roughly 33.4% or 33.4 cents. Tony Abboud is next. He's the director of Vapor Technology Association. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
They're rolling.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
Awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Tony Abboud, Executive Director of the Vapor Technology Association, joins us now. Hey, Tony.
Hey, Gerard. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for coming on today. Tell us about HB 916 headed to the governor's desk. What are your concerns?
Well, this is a bill that is really just going to hurt Mississippi small business owners by imposing Biden-era government overreach. I mean, this law that is restricting access to vaping products, which Mississippians and adults all over the country are using to quit smoking cigarettes, is going to take them off of the store shelves at a time when the Fifth Circuit has already ruled that the FDA's actions are both arbitrary and capricious. They didn't follow the rules, and the case is currently pending before the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court could decide that the FDA violated the law, and yet Mississippi is about to implement that law, which is an implementation of all the Biden-era FDA's decisions.
Tony, where does
That's the concern.
Where does President Trump stand on this issue?
It's a great question, because in 2019, when he was being asked to do basically what this bill does, which is ban flavored vaping products, he said no. He said, we're going to raise the age to 21. That's the kind of common sense he had back then and he's talking about today. And since then, youth vaping has dropped dramatically. Then, last September, he announced on the campaign that he is going to save flavored vaping again, because he pointed out that Joe and Kamala are trying to ban everything, shutting down small businesses all over the country. Again, HB 916 is going to do just that, and it's going to interfere with, frankly, the president's promise to save flavored vaping.
Tony, talk about the economic impact of the vaping industry on the state of Mississippi, just in terms of revenue generated for the economy, jobs, contributions, et cetera, to our economic benefit.
So the independent vaping industry, and we're talking about companies that are not owned and controlled by big tobacco, generates about $135 million in total economic impact for the state. It generates hundreds and hundreds of jobs and $32 or $33 million in wages and benefits to the people that are employed in this industry. From a tax perspective, we're looking at about a 77% loss on $23 million of state and local tax revenue that's generated by the industry. So these are real Mississippi businesses. You know, we're talking about folks that have built their businesses from the ground up, and they're kind of getting whipsawed by a lot of big money from out-of-state big tobacco companies that are trying to carve up the market. And that is not something, I think, that Mississippians should want to see happen.
And, of course, Tony, these products are subject to the full general sales tax rate as well, right?
Yeah, that is correct. So when you're not talking about just lost sales taxes, but you're talking about lost business taxes, because when these businesses shut down, and those employees stop paying income taxes, you know, it has a big ripple effect on the economy. And this isn't the time, it seems to me, particularly when everybody knows that bans don't work. And make no mistake, this is a ban. And the reason I say that is because the way the bill was drafted, it's going to make sure that only the oldest, and I mean 10-year-old vaping technologies, are going to be allowed to be sold, but the newest, safest, and most innovative products that people are demanding right now will not be sold. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, at the Federal Court of Appeals, said this is a de facto ban. And we all know what happens when bans happen with popular products. Black markets erupt. And that is something that will have untold costs for the state of Mississippi, both from a public health perspective and, you know, it'll be impossible to enforce.
Yeah. What do you think the reason, Tony, is that the House, the Senate, the governor all seem to concur that we should pass this bill, this legislation that I believe was authored by Chairman Trey Lamar in the House?
Yeah, I mean, vaping has always been an issue that has caused a lot of conflict, and you know, when there's a lot of big muddied interest telling half of the story, I think it's easy for legislators to understand that half of the story. But when you cut right to it, what they're asking for is implementing and making Mississippi the chief enforcement officer for all of the Biden FDA's decisions. I don't understand why the state of Mississippi would want to be in that role, because right now, as I said, those decisions are being questioned by the Supreme Court of the United States. And President Trump has said he's already said we're going to look at every single regulation to figure out whether or not it was lawful in the first instance. Mississippi should not be in the business of enforcing the Biden FDA's approach and their policies and becoming their enforcement arm. This is now, we have a new administration in Washington, D.C. This is a problem that needs to be fixed. And the misinformation that has been surrounding the vaping issue needs to be clarified. And the beautiful thing about President Trump is, like in 2019, he knows how to see through all of that stuff. And we believe that he will make the right decisions and do as he did in 2019 by raising the age to 21 and solving the youth vaping issue, and also protect small businesses. That's what he did back then. And I think that Mississippi should be in line with that and looking to find the common sense ways to actually protect youth, but also protect adult Mississippians' freedom to choose what kind of nicotine product they want to use.
So, Tony, help us out here. Does the bill, does it explicitly ban flavored vaping products, or does it kind of put in place some rules and regulations that effectively bans?
That's a great question. And you know how legislation works, right? It's all in the details.
Yeah.
First thing, Biden's FDA has effectively banned flavored vaping products, just like the Supreme Court has said. This bill ties Mississippi's decisions to the decisions of the FDA. So if whatever FDA has said is what Mississippi has to do as soon as this bill is passed. And the bill also, as I noted earlier, only allows products that are 10 years old. They were on the market in 2016. So none of the new and innovative flavored vaping products that have come to the market since then are going to be allowed to be sold. Because if you weren't on the market back in 2016 under this bill, you're done. And just think about that. Does that make any sense for consumers? Is anybody here really wanting the equivalent of an iPhone 7? I mean, these are technologies. They innovate, and they get better and better, faster and faster. And this bill is just locking the market into the oldest, antiquated products.
Okay, so it doesn't, because I'm looking at the legislation, that's why I asked. I reviewed it last night as well, but there's no provision that just says, hey, look, we're banning all flavored vaping products, but what you're pointing out is that it bans all those introduced post-2016, which essentially means you're back to whatever you had then?
Yeah, well, that's the first thing. The second thing is, since then, the FDA they've authorized one flavored vaping product.
I see.
Okay? You see? So whether it's a complete ban or, 99.99% of a ban, it's going to have the same effect because the small businesses are selling these newer, innovative, safer products, and they will not even be allowed to do that anymore because we want these Biden-era policies put in place in Mississippi.
We got about 20 seconds left, Tony. I'm just going to ask you this directly. Do you believe that this response, this legislation, is sort of deference to the big tobacco guys?
Well, I think that all you got to look at the fact is that they have been pushing this bill all around the country. Okay. Last year, this legislature said no, and as did most of the states around the country. They're pushing it all around the country because they have told their shareholders that these products, which HB 916...
From the Sticks with Rebecca Turner may cause smiling, feelings of positivity, happiness, and even laughter. When you experience these symptoms, tell your friends to listen. Okay. Weekdays starting at 2 p.m. here on SuperTalk Mississippi and now on Amazon Alexa devices.
It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. The regular crowd shuffles in. There's an old man sitting next to me, making love to his tonic and gin.
Well, that's the tune that launched his career. 1973, Piano Man. I had the album. Pretty dang talented. Billy Joel, appreciate that. That's the favorite artist of our content director, Alex Payton. She's a big Billy Joel fan. So, okay, this vaping deal, man, it's looking at the legislation, It's one of those bills that kind of hurts your head to review. You looked at it a little bit. Would you agree? It's lots of references, this, that, and the other. And I guess I'm learning something here that I didn't know, which is I don't think this is new, but a retailer, a manufacturer, distributor has to submit a certified report to the Commissioner of Revenue of Mississippi every year showing all the various tobacco products, right, that they sell or that they're involved with, because they could be a distributor, they could be a retailer, and as a distributor they're selling too, of course, or they could be a manufacturer, I believe, as well, wholesaler. Nonetheless, they've got to provide a report to the commissioner on a form that the commissioner prescribes, certifying that they are in compliance with state law with respect to the distribution, manufacture, distribution, and sale of said products, right? And apparently, if you're carrying one that hasn't been certified yet, you have to note that, and then it's essentially, at that point, submitted for certification. Where I got confused, maybe you could help us out here, is if you're retailing products, for example, that are not certified, after a certain period of time, you got to remove those and dispose of them, right, from your inventories, the way I understood it, just reading through.
Technically, yes.
Okay. 60 days from the date that the commissioner first makes the directory available for inspection on the department's website to either sell cigarettes in their inventory, which are not included in the directory, or remove them from inventory. So it sounds like the commissioner controls what can be sold, distributed, vis-a-vis tobacco products in the state of Mississippi, and retailers, distributors, et cetera, have to comply and can't offer products that aren't certified and thus on the list. Is that what you're understanding?
I think it's right? Also kind of like a freshness guarantee tacked on to a way to combat black marketing.
Makes sense.
Because if you have a bunch of cigarettes that have gone stale, then you offload them to someone that they don't know it's stale, creating a black market and creating unsatisfied customers. It's a double whammy of bad publicity.
Right. And technically, if you remove them, you're not supposed to then make them available for sale after that. Okay, yeah, right, sure. Right. You hear me on that. So now a lot of folks may not...
They were in the dumpster last I checked.
Right. Now a lot of folks may not realize that if you look at the bottom, say, of a pack of cigarettes, you'll see a stamp, right? And so...
A little tax stamp, yeah.
That's the distributors purchase stamps from the Department of Revenue and then have to affix that to the package, indicating they've paid the tax.
And there's a different one in every state.
That's exactly right. And so when you hear discussions of the black market of tobacco, and you'll hear it referred to as unstamped products, right? So I know this is crazy, but a long time ago, like back in the 90s, I actually implemented a order entry accounting distribution system for one of the oldest tobacco and sundry retailers in the state that sold to convenience stores, obviously, retail convenience stores and the like, where those products are typically retailed, sold as retail. And I learned about all that stuff because we had to incorporate all that in the system. But that's interesting. So what I'm looking at is that there is, as Tony said, I just want to kind of close this topic out. Tony said is that there is a reference, you see that, Rhino, to the FDA, and you've got to be in compliance there. And so I suspect that the commissioner's catalog, if you will, also, of course, constantly reviews that and ensures that the commissioner's catalog coincides with the FDA's list. I'm simplifying that a little bit, but I think in general that's how it works. So I didn't realize that the Biden administration, I didn't realize that they had taken some action here.
Yeah, they were back and forth on several different issues regarding tobacco and vaping. They came out in a similar statement to Trump's, saying that it wasn't a priority. They weren't worried about it. And then I believe at one point they did try to ban it, and that's how you got the FDA involved in all this.
Okay.
They also took actions, I believe, to ban menthol cigarettes, which I also believe Trump has reversed.
That's right. There was, I remember that. There was legislation to do that. So wonder what the Trump administration has done with respect to vaping products after, I guess, is that your understanding? After the Biden administration implemented policies that banned those that were created, as Tony indicated, after 2016?
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody in the Trump administration discussing vaping.
Me either.
Like the only thing I've seen them involving the tobacco industry in any way was the overturning of the menthol ban.
So,
I don't even think it had been implemented. I think it was to look into the implementation of it, and they just stopped it in its tracks.
Well, I guess where I was going is trying to understand, if that's taken effect, then wouldn't that mean that all these products would not be available? But they are available today, so I'm a little confused about that. Right? If Biden implemented such policies, banning products introduced after 2016, and that's current law or current regulation, why? But those products are still available. So
I want to say involved in the ban products, like you can't offer for sale any products manufactured after a certain date, so you can still sell the back stock.
I see. So we're headed in that direction, essentially.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So it seems to me like, and maybe I'm missing this, and I apologize for now thinking about this and not asking Tony, and I know some contacts in the state that are working with him. I'll try to figure that out from them. But that seems to me like that what we should be doing is lobbying the Trump administration, right, to reverse those Biden regulations. And maybe that's coming, and that would fix this problem. Not sure. But this thing's been signed into law, right? That's what I saw.
I believe it was headed to the governor's desk. I haven't seen an update that it's been signed yet.
Yeah, I may have misread it, and I apologize for that if I did. But my understanding was that, let me look here real quick, current status. It says enrolled bill signed on 3/17. Okay. Signed on 3/14 in the House, and then on 3/17. So what does that mean? I don't know that I've ever seen the status quite put that way, if you're looking for that. Could be.
Yeah, it's been signed by the Speaker and signed by the Lieutenant Governor. It hasn't been signed by the Governor.
Right, you got it. And that's because they evidently went to, would mean they went to conference, right, to work through that.
Yeah, they had to go to concurrence.
Yeah,
correct.
To concurrence, and then had an amendment from the Senate, got voted on. Then the House and Senate signed it, been sent up to the governor. It appears he is set to sign it as well. Okay. That's where we are on that. What on Cynthia from Yazoo concerning our discussion in the first segment about the two bills pertaining to taxes in the state of Mississippi, the new one, not really a new one, but a revised draft update amendment to HB 1, the House bill, and then something on the Senate as well. Cynthia from Yazoo says, what is the current excise tax on gasoline? It's 18.4 cents, Cynthia. When was the last time it was raised? 1987. Do you know what other states around us are charging? I do, and here it goes. Louisiana's 20.93 cents, Alabama 29, Arkansas 24.7, and Tennessee 27.4. I actually have a chart that shows that in the House Bill 1 Explained article I wrote. It's on SuperTalk, Mississippi. This would increase it, should the House bill pass as is. It would increase the 18.4 to 33.4, giving us the highest excise tax of the adjacent states. Coming right back.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Johnny was a schoolboy when he heard his first Beatles song. Love me do, I think it was, but from there it didn't take him long. Got himself a guitar.
So I was asking about the FDA regulations. It seems like those would be in effect, would cause a lot of these products to be unavailable. Mike from Columbus says, well, that's because the Biden administration didn't enforce anything. The only thing they pursued were ways to get Trump. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. No doubt. He's a lobbyist for vape companies. Well, sure. A lot of companies have lobbyists, have government affairs and government relations folks. So Ed from New Hope says Lieutenant Governor Hoseman is just hosing the state of Mississippi. Interesting. All right. So what else we got? I think that's about it on the C Spire text line. Just continuing the analysis of the revised House tax bill, and then we'll tackle the Senate. But if you were with us in the first segment, at the very end, the excise tax on fuel, and now remember, excise taxes are based on the quantity purchased. So every time you buy gas, you pay 18.4 cents per gallon to the state of Mississippi. That goes to the Department of Transportation for road and bridge construction and maintenance. The House bill would increase that by 15 cents in 5-cent increments over 3 years. And that would put our excise tax on fuel as the highest in the region relative to our neighboring adjacent states at 33.4 cents per gallon, just so you'll know. The next would be Alabama. Alabama at 29, and Arkansas at 24.7, Tennessee at 27. So we would certainly jump up the list. Currently, we're 49th at 18.4 cents per gallon. 49th. I believe that only Alaska, right? You and I looked at that not too long ago, Rhino. Yeah, they're at 9 cents a gallon. At one time, they were 9 cents. They're 50th. We come in at 49th, presently at 18.4. So we would jump up considerably. Kentucky is right in the middle at 30 cents. So we would be in the top 50s, one way to look at it, at 33 cents, should this go through. But this is designed to provide more funding to the Department of Transportation. Now, also, as proposed in HB 1, originally, the first $100 million of lottery proceeds from the Mississippi Lottery Corporation would be allocated to the public employees retirement system until such time as it reaches an 80% funding ratio. It's about 56% right now. It's got a ways to go. So the Department of Transportation is essentially losing the $80 million presently going its way from lottery proceeds in accordance with the original Alice G. Clark Lottery Act enacted in special session in 2018. That would go away, so it would, however, be replaced by this new funding from the 15 cents additional excise tax. So how it affects your situation, you'd have to model it, honestly. If I know retired folks in particular pay a lot of attention to this because their retirement income is not subject to income tax, so not times not equal not. Even a zero income tax rate means nothing from an income tax perspective, no savings realized there. But they would realize savings on the decrease in the sales tax on groceries by 2%. But they would also realize an increase on non-groceries of 1%, and then on fuel, that would go up 15 cents per gallon. So you got some net ins and outs. Your grocery sales taxes go down, your general sales taxes go up, your fuel sales taxes or fuel taxes go up, cost of fuel, but you get no benefit from income taxes and the elimination thereof. The Senate takes a little different approach to that. It's basically the original Senate bill, which does decrease the grocery sales tax to 5%, no change to the general sales tax, increases your fuel taxes by 9 cents as opposed to the House bill, which increases it by 15 cents. However, the Senate bill does call for elimination, phasing out of the income tax, but only if certain triggers are achieved. Now, I got to tell you, you're going to have to stick with me later on in the program to review that math with you. It's a little wonky, but I think we can break it down in a way you'll understand. Bottom line is, the House bill says we're going to eliminate the income tax. We're going to phase it out over 10 years once we hit 2027, and no triggers required. The Senate says, nope, we got to achieve certain milestones to do that. Coming right back with Jacobi Grant from
Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. J. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. You are tuned in to Middays, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Tomorrow, Middays with Gerard Gibert will be at the Westin downtown Jackson for the Madison County Business League and Foundation's 17th annual legislature luncheon. You'll hear from political and business leaders from across the state as they talk about the most important issues impacting our state. Looking forward to that remote for sure. And then, let's see, we're going to be remote on Thursday as well. Rhino headed up to Tupelo for that one. Looking forward to that. Don't forget, we're in the Element Wealth studio. Are you thinking about or planning for retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. Big tech leading a broad sell-off today. The NASDAQ down 296 after it had a couple of decent days, Friday and Saturday. The Dow down 333. The old kangaroo continues to hop rather vigorously. No doubt we are looking at a very volatile situation in the markets. Rhino, the funny money. How about that, man?
Oh, I hadn't even checked. Let's do a live reaction to my funny money account as it loads up. It's not that bad. It's still above 80.
Yeah, but it's kind of on the brink of diving through that and getting into the 70s, 70,000. So we'll see. The 10-year yield, it down as well. That affects your interest rates. Bitcoin, 81,000 today, down 2,600. So a bit of a sell-off there. Just still a lot of uneasiness, uncertainty across the markets with respect to the Trump economic agenda, tariffs, and the like. I tell you, I think we'll see this volatility for a while, next 4-6 months. I do feel like toward the end of the year, we're going to see a rally. We're going to see the old bulls come out again. My bet, my money is on American companies and the American economy, and I think good days are ahead. But today, all of the indexes are down 1% or thereabouts. So don't check your accounts. Right now, you probably won't like what you see. Whew! So we are waiting for our guests, by the way. We'll get them on as soon as we get them here. So we were talking about taxes and the different plans coming out of the House and the Senate. We reviewed the House plan for you. Final piece of that, of course, was related to the PERS program. It needs money. And the House says we're going to send $100 million, the first $100 million of the lottery proceeds to the PERS fund. Stroke that check over their way. The Senate has a different approach here. The Senate says, okay, we're going to reduce the income tax. We're going to go ahead and pare it down to 3%, I believe. Just let me make sure I got that right. I believe that was the plan, down to 3% by 2030. And then we're going to go gradually from there, pare it on down based on, and that, by the way, would be incremental from the 4% in 2026 down to 3% in 2030. So you'd have 27, 28, 29, 30, so 0.25% increments. And then after that, folks, this is where it gets a little dicey. After that, the income tax would be further reduced based on achievement of certain metrics, certain triggers. But specifically, it would require that the state's revenue exceeds its expenses by a figure that is computed as 85% of what a 1% tax rate cut would mean to revenue. So each 1% presently is worth about $450 million. So in order to further cut the income tax, push out to 2031. Okay, so we're at the 3% rate in 2030. Actually, we're in the session in 2030. Is where we are because we're planning for 31. So imagine we're in the session in 2030. We got revenues from 29. We got spending for fiscal year 31 because that's when the legislature takes up appropriations for the coming fiscal year, which begins July 1. So we're in the 2030 session, just like right now in 2025, they're hammering out spending plans, the budget for fiscal year 2026. So in 2030, we'll be doing 2031, the subsequent year. All right, so you'll compare the revenues of 29 at that point with projected spending of 31, and you'll calculate whether or not that generates a surplus that's equal to 85% of what 1% accounts for. I know that gets kind of wonky, but follow the math here. If each 1% of the income tax rate generates roughly $450 million of revenue, the surplus at that point would have to compute at $382 million. Rough round numbers there. Okay, if that's it, then the Senate bill says we will cut the income tax rate by 20 basis points or 0.2. So we go from 3 to 2.8 in that year. Fast forward to the next year. Same exercise. Revenues, expenses. Does that equal to what a 1% cut would equal? At that point, it's roughly a third, little less than a third, about 30%. Okay, so if the surplus projected comes in at 85% of that, then we're cut another 20 basis points. By the way, if it's 100% of that, so if the surplus projected is $400 million, and that is equal to what 1% of cutting the income tax rate equals to, it's also $400 million. Boom, we've got a surplus that's equal to a 1% cut. We're going to cut 30 basis points, or 0.3% off the income tax rate. If it calculates to be 115% of what 1% of the rate equals to in terms of revenue, then we'll cut it by 30%. So a little wonky on the math. I apologize for that, but that is the way the Senate bill would incrementally eliminate the income tax. Totally different than the House's plan. Just basically says, hey, look, if it looks like we're still producing surpluses, if that surplus is at least 85% of what a 1% cut in the tax rate equals, we're going to reduce the income tax rate. And you would just keep doing that as long as these surpluses ensue until you get to zero. Hope that made some sense there. So bottom line is, it's milestones, it's thresholds, it's financial metrics that are used that have to be achieved in order to further reduce the income tax. It's not as the House bill, which says, no, we're putting this thing, we're setting it into motion. We're going to chop the income tax rate incrementally over 10 years, no matter what. We're just going to claw back the income tax rate. The Senate says, not so fast, House. We're for that as well, but we're going to do some math, and we're going to determine that essentially, if you think about it, our surplus is sufficient to cover further reductions. Projected surplus is sufficient to cover further reductions in the income tax rate. We're coming right back with more in the Element Wealth Studio.
Patriotism.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We are live from the Element Wealth Studio. Thanks so much for joining us now. We're pleased to welcome now Jacobi Grant. He's a Research Compliance Officer of the Division of Research and Economic Development at Jackson State University, and has brought along with him a couple of students, Zion and Angel. Jacobi, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Gerard. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir, you bet. So you and I met at an event a couple of weeks ago.
Lance Varner's Barn Burner.
The Barn Burner.
Yeah.
And you approached me. I was emceeing the event. You approached me when I came off the stage about possibly coming on and talking to us about some of the work you're doing there with your students at Jackson State, trying to encourage them to engage in the political process and, in particular, be an active voter. Tell us about that.
Yes, sir. So I am the Research Compliance Officer for Jackson State, but also serve as an adjunct professor of political science.
Okay.
And one of the things that we've been researching is voter apathy across millennials and Gen Z. So I had some students that were interested a couple years ago. This project has been in the working and in the works. We've done it for the past 3 years with a multitude of different partners. And so I had a group of students that came to me and who were like, we want to try to solve this problem that is voter apathy. So we created a group called JSU Votes. And the purpose of the organization is to promote civic engagement amongst millennials and Gen Z, and have their peers doing it. Yeah. So a lot of what we focus on is not necessarily voter registration, but the education and awareness component, in hopes that young people will understand how politics impacts them directly, and it would ultimately make them more apt to go out and cast a vote.
Gotcha. Angel, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your major? What's your year at Jackson State?
Hello. I am a political science major freshman at Jackson State University. I moved here from Detroit, Michigan, and I am the social media manager for JSU Votes.
Oh, cool. So, are you registered to vote in Mississippi?
Actually, I vote back home since I'm more familiar with my politics back home. Okay. And I live in a swing state, so I think that it's very important for me to vote where I am from and where I'm more informed about.
Okay. Are you thinking about perhaps moving permanently and joining our state? We'd love to have you.
Yes, I am. I'm still in the works of thinking about it, but I am thinking about becoming a registered voter in Mississippi since this is becoming my new home. Okay. And wanted to make so much of a change with my vote and with my ballot. Okay. But you have you voted in past elections? I'm not sure of your age. I just want to make sure there. So I voted my first election, and my last election was the presidential election. Okay. And as of right now, I am casting in my absentee ballot for my primary election back home.
What about you, Zion? Tell us about it.
Well, let me just start off by saying good morning, Mississippi. My name is Zion Washington. I am a freshman political science major from Jackson State University, and I'm so glad to be on the show this morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Glad to have you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, what are you majoring in?
I'm majoring in political science, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And are you registered to vote?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. And is Mississippi your residence?
Yes.
All right.
All right.
So one of the things we got coming up, Zion, is we've got local elections. And when we talk about voter apathy, we seem to run into more apathy in getting out to vote in these local elections, which are incredibly important. Seems like we get folks out to a great degree when there's national elections, but we don't fare so well in local elections.
Yeah, that is true, and that's exactly why we're actually hosting 2 informational candidate forums on the Jackson State University College of Liberal Arts. It'll be on March 25th for the Councilman Informational Forum, and then March 27th for the Mayoral Candidate Forum. And actually, our programs are a product of the research we have conducted on voter apathy. We believe that our research is a key contributor to voter apathy and is the modern method in which people obtain their political news, and more specifically, millennials and Generation Z. We believe they do not watch conventional TV and conventional news like previous generations in the past. So we have designed a program that can be presented on non-conventional media platforms in which millennials and Generation Z frequently watch more than conventional TV and political news. So we'll be hosting our event on Instagram. We'll be hosting it on Facebook, Twitter, and, outlets that modern you get what I'm getting at. Yeah. So our events provide all of the candidates 4 minutes to individually introduce themselves and their political platform and what distinguishes them from their competition. Moreover, the purpose of this program is to educate the public on which candidates will appear on the ballot, and also to make citizens aware of each candidate's platform in hopes they will then understand the importance of registering to vote and ultimately turning out their cast to vote and going to the ballot box in the future.
Angel, have you done any sort of research to determine the student population's penetration as far as being registered to vote? Is there an issue there, or are most students registered to vote?
Research studies indicates that a lot of college students aren't informed and believe that they don't have the right amount of information to want to vote. So they have become into the mindset that our vote doesn't matter or politics isn't important. So we are trying to get out and stop that voter apathy and grasp the students into believing that they do matter.
Jacobi, do you think that this will that this event you're hosting, this sort of classic type of debate, come make your case to the voters. Do you think that may inspire folks to get out and cast a ballot?
Well, yeah, like Angel was saying, from the research that we've conducted, the biggest issue or contributor to voter apathy is the awareness component. Young people specifically aren't aware of election cycles. So only reason they hear about the presidential one is because it's national. But when we get down to local and municipal elections, a lot of young people lack the awareness. So that's, again, part of that's what the research says. So what we're trying to do is provide a solution to that. So since you aren't aware, we specialize in creating events to educate you on who the people are and make you aware of what they're running for and when. And our hope is that the additional information that they receive will ultimately have them understand why so many people say, hey, register to vote. And ultimately that will allow them to turn out and this is an experiment here. The research that the students have been conducting says that conventional news is not high amongst the priorities of millennials and Gen Z because all the other streaming options and online options that are available to get their political news, etc. So what we've decided to do was the solution to the problem is we will provide political candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves, and we'll bring it to social media platforms where young people frequent more often. When I grew up, you grew up, Mr. Gerard, we 6, 10, 5 o'clock, the news came on, and we could count on receiving information on elections and different civic engagement processes. But future generations, millennials and Gen Z, they have Netflix, Amazon Prime, all these other options available where the news isn't forced on them. They have other alternatives. And so what we're trying to do is provide an alternative news source that lacks the narrowcasting. We want to be as nonpartisan and objective as possible to ultimately encourage people to participate and see the importance of participating.
Zion, who coordinated this event you got coming up? Who contacted the candidates and extended the invitation?
Actually, our group, Just Vote JSU, did. It was me, it was Angel, and a group of our other peers that actually work within the organization, as well as Mr. Grant for giving us the information that we needed to actually reach out to these candidates. We messaged them via email, we messaged them via text message, and we reached out to them to get their email so we can actually formally invite them to our forum.
And we can't forget about our collaborative partners either.
Okay.
The Sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated have assisted our students in this research and putting this event together, as well as the League of Women Voters, who often come through and provide the students different trainings to make sure that they stay aware of different election cycles and understand where to go find information. A lot of those two primary entities assist me in educating the students and ensuring that they understand where they can find information, how they can reach these candidates, where to go to find who are all of the candidates that qualify.
And Angel, you've got media covering this, right? That'll be broadcasting this. Is the public invited?
Yes, the public is invited. Of course, of our campus students are invited, and we have just JSU, Jackson State TV, hosting an event.
Okay.
We are live streaming the event. The Delta Sigma Theta organization is live streaming the event, and the League of Women will be having someone there who will be showing it on news. We also have a news reporter coming who will be doing a section in the newsletter for Mississippi Link for us as of this event.
Okay. We got a break right here, but if you guys can hang around, we can continue the discussion on the other side. That good with everybody?
Sounds good.
All right. We're coming right back, folks. We're in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
I'm checking trouble, sugar, moving down the line. I come up hard, babe, but that's okay, 'cause trouble man don't get in my way. I come up hard, babe. I've been for real, babe. Gonna keep moving, gonna go to town. I come up getting down.
Welcome back, everyone. We are in the Element Well studio. Jacobi Grant from Jackson State University and Zion and Angel, two political science majors from Jackson State, are our guests. So let's continue to talk about how do we get college students in particular, just young people, how do we get them more engaged in the political process to take a more active interest in voting? You guys said earlier that they just don't see how this affects them. It's not stuff they are even familiar with because they're plugged into so many other, I guess, forms of entertainment and platforms that they just don't see a lot of information about elections, voting, etc. And I'm with you, Professor. Back in my day, you had the 1 30-minute local news broadcast and 3 different 30-minute national news broadcasts, and that was it. And if you didn't catch that, you didn't really find out what was going on, other than maybe waiting the next day for newspapers. And most of us didn't read that when we were young, but you seem to be aware of it then. But now it's like there's lots of other interest and distractions. Is that fair to say, Zion?
Yes, sir. I actually do believe that. And one of the main reasons that is the case is because most of the college students have to understand the injustices that they are facing at the local level. And like you were saying, to your point, there is a lot of distractions that go on. There's social media, there's Instagram, there's things that plague our communities. And so one of the ways we can combat that is by helping the students understand the injustices that they do face on a local level and helping them understand the purpose of local elections, and also to help the students better understand how the process works in the first place. Because one of the main things you'll see today is not only students don't understand the electoral process, but they don't understand how it directly affects them. And that's exactly why we're using our program to live stream our event and get it to a broader youth audience, because we believe that Instagram, social media, and platforms such as that nature are important to helping the youth understand the political process.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're getting through, Angel? Are you starting to see people react and say, okay, yeah, I do need to get more involved in this?
Yes, I am starting to see that we are doing a good change here. And one thing about the younger generation, my peers, is that they are turned off by the idea of the political polarization and the fact that they have to choose which party they want to align with or who they want to stand behind. And they think that is going to identify where they will stand for the rest of their time voting and casting a ballot. But we want to pull that out and get them to understand that they have to be behind the person that they want them to represent. They want to be represented by. We also want to identify democratic elitism and show them that America was defined off of this. And if you understand the things that we are building and the things that this country is trying to build, then you will understand that your vote does matter and your vote does count. And you will understand that you have to get out and do something if you want to be represented equally, and if you want to be represented by the things that you want to see as a change in your city, in your system, in your state, in your country.
To what extent, Jacobi, do you try to impress upon the students that America is somewhat unique in our electoral system, our elections provisions and systems, and that it is, in fact, a privilege to be able to go to the ballot box and cast a vote and select who you want to represent us? We of course live in a representative democracy, a Republican form of government. It's a privilege. It's a right. You need to take advantage of it.
Oh yeah, that's what makes this place such a great country to live in. And I always start with the students by I like to use a quote by a famous historical explorer, Alexander de Tocqueville, who, when he landed in America, he was fascinated by the people's ability to partake in the system. He said that's what really made it such a great place, was everyone had a voice. And so I tried, like Angel, one of the main things I tried to do is start with education and understanding how our system of government works. It's designed for citizens to choose who they want to represent them.
Yeah.
And so with that, taking that fact into consideration, that's ultimately what defines us as citizens. You're only a citizen if you engage civically. If you do not engage civically, technically you're not a citizen because you're not participating in the process and having a say-so in how things work. So I try to present it to them in a logical manner. And then I take a practical approach as well. We discuss different socio-political issues, and I try to tie that into, okay, well, if that's what you have a problem with, you can discuss that with your local councilman on what level to start with and explain to them the ideal of federalism.
Yeah.
So they can understand that, yes, although the federal elections are very important, you also have local elections that dictate the same principles, legislation on a lower level that impact you as well. And so the education part of it, even when we go out to different community events, one of the things we stress to individuals is understanding the election process. One thing I learned recently, you may be familiar with, was the at-large system in certain counties in the state of Mississippi. I know Rankin County is a subject to where certain cities have at-large elections and then at-large post positions. A lot of individuals do not know that or understand how those work. So one of the biggest things we try to do is, and like Angel said, some of the research that we found elaborated on the impact of polarization and how it can turn individuals off. So one of the things I try to get the students to focus on is remaining objective and as nonpartisan as possible in the delivery of information so people get the clearest picture possible, and ultimately that may provoke them to participate more.
Interesting. Zion, do you feel like in the classroom, perhaps in Mr. Grant's classroom and just at the university in general, does it promote and support the free exchange of ideas, or do you feel like that just one set of ideas or one philosophy is being pushed on the students?
No, we absolutely promote the idea of free range of different ideologies. We have a very diverse set of students at our university, and they all stem from different backgrounds and different cultures, so we all have different beliefs as well. So there's open topics, there's open discussion, there's not just one-sided philosophy, it's not partisan. We all kind of just all collaborate together and say, hey, I like what you're saying over here and I like what you're saying over here as well. Let's come together and collaborate on that and find a valid solution that we can have a consensus on.
Angel, you agree with that? Is that your experience?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yes, I do agree. I take a little more classes outside of my major. So in those classes, I feel like we have such a broadened aspect of what we talk about, and we talk about different things, and we let everyone have a different type of mindset, and we let everyone come together as one and believe that it's okay to disagree, and it's okay as long as we all come together and decide that we are going to stand up for what we believe in.
How about just being respectful and civil? It seems like, Jacobi, we've lost that to some extent in this country. We got to return to that.
Well, as an instructor, that's one of the main things. I'm a big proponent of Socratic methods. So in a lot of my classrooms, I throw out open subjects to create conversation. And one of the things that I remind the students is, this is how America works. No two people think the same. Even when they agree on something, they may agree for different reasons. So you learn more with your eyes and your ears than you do your mouth. So take time to listen to what the person, your classmates, is saying, especially if it's something you disagree with, and then develop an intellectual response. And like Zion said, those are the means, the best ways we can come to compromise. You know, a lot of the polarization in our political processes today is what I use to demonstrate. I tell the students, this is what y'all say turns y'all off, so why would you act like that when you're discussing political issues? And those are the things, it begins to resonate. And like Zion said, that, okay, we can have this open conversation. You can tell me how you feel. I can listen to how you feel, and we can try to come to some medium or consensus. And that ultimately is what our political process is. And so if we can, I'm trying to get my students to understand that, and hopefully they will be more apt to participate in the process on a regular basis.
And, of course, you guys know in some countries this is what separates America from the rest, and it's the reason the First Amendment is the first one in the amendment. It's that right to free speech. In some countries, you don't have that right. We got about a minute left. You don't have that right in some countries, Zion. You could as much as lose your life for just expressing your opinion. And so America's different in that respect.
Yes.
Angel?
And we want to say one more thing, that we are trying to make videos to give information to our audience and show them that what is going on in politics today and all the deadlines that you need to register for, all the things that you need to vote for, and different things like that. So as social media manager for JSU Votes, me and Zion are recording videos and showing people and giving them information from our social media platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.
Appreciate having you guys in. It's been a delight to have you.
Thank you for having us. And everyone go vote. Tell your children, your grandchildren, nieces, nephews. Yes. April 1st is the primary day. Unless you're in an at-large district, then you'll just vote on June 3rd in the general. But
we got to go.
April
Thanks. 1st. Yep. We're coming right back, folks. Thanks.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Well studio. Thanks so much for joining us. Wow, that was good. I enjoyed that. The professor, the two students, what a delight. Great ambassadors for their university, Jackson State University. And if you caught us on video, that's great. But I can attest they were dressed very appropriately, very professionally, well-groomed, well-kept, articulate, ready, prepared, not nervous. That was great. Anytime, you're around young folks like that and you have that sort of interaction, it kind of renews your faith in the future and your beliefs about where we're going. And I believe them when they say that in their experience they're not having some single point of view from some radical professor thrust on them. I'm not going to say that doesn't exist at Jackson State. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist on every dang university campus. Nothing unique there. But I do feel like, having gotten to know the professor a little bit, that he does respect the fact that his students benefit more when they're exposed to different viewpoints. I do believe that. And that's the way it should be. That's if you miss the opportunity when you're in college to learn how to think critically, which means that you consume a variety of inputs and viewpoints, then you're likely not to be as successful as you could be. How about that? Is that fair enough, Rhino, to say that?
Yeah.
In
fact, I would argue that in the majority of cases, there are some instances where the content you learn in college matters to your future. But I'd argue the majority of it is learning how to be on your own, how to think on your own, how to work through a crisis, how to work through problems, how to stay to a schedule without having your hand held.
No doubt.
Without being mollycoddled. And that's what I feel like part of the problem is with academia, is they feel like they need to be these kids' parents, especially in higher education. It's like, no, those kids have parents.
No doubt.
The relationship with the parents might not be the best, but they have parents. Your job is to educate, not be mommy and daddy.
Is it?
Especially in college.
I felt that the speed at which content changes, just because of the digitization of our society, in a good way, but the cycles of the discovery in the creation of new information. I'm not talking about more volume. I'm talking about just new discoveries, new things. It's hard for a college classroom to keep up with that. But what you should learn as part of the college experience is how to learn and how to manage that reality. That's, to your point. That's
the difference between a good professor and a bad professor. A good professor, even if they know the information is a little bit dated, they'll tell you.
Right.
Hey, this is a study case from a year ago.
Right.
Or this is a case study from a decade ago.
Right. And that's fair enough, but
the bad professors are the ones that go, this is the case study. Well, it's from 1977. Yeah, but this is the case study. It's going to be relevant. No, it's not.
We live
Things
in a
have
world,
changed since 50 years ago.
You know, when I first started the business in 1986, I know this sounds crazy, but in working with customers, you got to remember back in those days, guys, customers were hesitant to computers. We don't use those things back in those days. It's not like today where you can't find a company, a business, an organization that is not automated, some more than others. But back then, we got a lot of pushback, a lot of reluctance, a lot of hesitation. And it's because they fear change. It's just a natural human reaction. We don't like change. We're creatures of habit. And I submit the older we get, the more we become creatures of habit and the more resistant we are to change. And I remember telling customers, guys, the only constant we can expect from this point forward is change. That's the thing you know that's going to be the constant, which is change. And then you think about today, Rhino in particular, how much we are just affected by disruption. Is there a business out there? Is there an endeavor out there that's not subject to disruption? One of the things that I caught that just fascinated me, and something we've talked about many times on the program, is advances in battery technology. So have you seen, Rhino, that the Chinese company, BYD, an EV manufacturer, their shares are surging because they've come up with a way to charge an EV in 5 minutes for a 400-mile range. Tesla on the same thing. Senator Josh Harkins next.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Well studio. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of the program. Don't forget, once again, we're going to be at the Westin downtown Jackson for the Madison County Business League and Foundation's 17th Annual Legislature Luncheon. Looking forward to that remote. So right now, it is Senator Josh Harkins. He chairs the Senate Finance Committee. We wanted to have him come in and break down the latest proposal from the Senate with respect to reforming taxes in Mississippi. What about it there, Senator?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So you had a little floor action this morning, but it didn't last long, huh?
No, we're going back in at 1:30.
But we're getting down to the old final days, aren't we?
We're getting close.
So we
closer than we've ever been.
All right, so that's right. We got new, I guess, updated legislation from the Senate concerning proposals to reform taxes in the state of Mississippi. Numerous features in that. I went through a breakdown earlier on the program, and I know it can get a little confusing when you start talking about the so-called triggers and the out years to continue to whittle away at the income tax. But perhaps talk more just generally about why the necessity for triggers to continue to cut the rate?
Well, this is to protect yourself, or in this case, the state from ending up like Kansas or somebody else, where they didn't have any triggers or guardrails. They went too far, too fast, and it caused problems. And they had to go back and raise taxes and do things. And so, what we want to do is, and what this bill essentially does, is it lets the economy dictate and warrant the necessity to cut taxes. We're saying if the economy is performing, we will in later years go through and these triggers will kind of guide us. But if the economy is performing, we will cut taxes further and continue to do so until it's eliminated. If the economy is performing, and that should be the ultimate judge of whether or not it's a cut is warranted. Is if the economy is progressing and activity is out there, and people's jobs are out there abundant, the wages are going up, all the things you would associate with economic prosperity and growth. Well, that's going to be evidenced by the revenues that are coming in to the state through economic activity. And so what we're saying is, all right, let's let that be our guiding light. Let that be the North Star. If our economy is doing good, we're bringing in revenues, and we keep spending in check. Part of this also has a spending component. You have to watch spending. And so in both sides, we come in every year and vote on budgets. And so we'll know, based on the trigger language, we'll know what the revenue was from the prior year. And if our spending is in check and it creates a difference that meets the trigger language, we'll cut either 20 basis points, meaning 2.20 or 0.25 or 0.30. Depends on how the economy's going. If it's roaring, then we'll be making big cuts, and if it's not going as fast as some would expect or like, then there may be smaller cuts, but there'll be cuts nonetheless.
Starts with the need to have a projected surplus in the coming fiscal year. When you're deliberating the possibility of this trigger going into effect, which you don't have to if this were to become law. It would happen automatically. But when you're looking at the numbers to see if it would apply, you're comparing forecasted expenses with what which is current year revenues. And if that produces a surplus, it's got to start with a surplus. But it's got to at least be equal to 85% of what cutting the income tax rate by 1% would be.
Yes.
Right?
So let's put that in numbers. Right now, the cost to cut 1% off our rate. So if we, at the end of next year, we'll have a 4% flat tax rate. And based on the last full year, calendar year taxes we had, it would cost about $400 million, a little over $400 million, 407, but we'll just say $400 million for round numbers' sake. That's the cost to cut 1 full point off the income tax rate. We're saying if that surplus from your prior year revenue collections and your current year spend, that surplus is 85% of that $400 million number, we'll cut 20 basis points. We'll cut 2.20 off the income tax rate. If it's 100% of that number, $400 million or more, we'll cut 25 basis points. And if the economy is really doing well and there's a lot of money that's come in to the state that year and we have 115% of that number, we'll cut 30 basis points. But the strength of our economy is going to determine the necessity or the warrant a cut in the income tax rate.
So just to complete the math there, $340 million, if at least the calculation of revenue versus expenses yields $340 million, 85% of the 1%, which is, you said, $400 million roughly. If it comes out to be at least $340 million, then we will cut income taxes by effectively $90 million, something like that.
About that much.
Yeah,
that's the effective cut.
0.2. Yeah. So we go from 3 in that case. Let's say it's 2031 to 2.8.
2.8,
and we just continue that exercise.
If there's $400 million of surplus, we'll cut it to 2.75, and if there's over $460 million, we cut it to 2.7.
Right, gotcha. Yeah, 20, 25, 30.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. So in a year where we didn't achieve that requirement, no change to the income tax.
But if you had a $200 million surplus, you would have a $200 million jump on the following year. And if you had another, $2 $250 million in excess revenue, that puts you over a 0.3 reduction. So it also makes us keep the spending in check. That's on the backside of this. It's based on revenue, but there's a spending component. If you keep your spending in line and don't go crazy spending, then you'll have that surplus there in order to cut taxes.
Okay.
What I think the important part that we wanted, there are two things that the Senate position kind of took into consideration is we didn't want to sit here and squeeze everything out of it and borrow money, go back into borrowing a lot of money to fund the things that are recurring in government spending. We have a lot of buildings across the state through our community colleges, our IHL, our state-owned buildings. There's a lot of property that requires maintenance. There's a good bit of recurring expenditures that are there year in, year out that are not necessarily budgeted in the sense like general fund appropriations, but they are problems that we have to address year in, year out. And so I think that was the thing that we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't sit here and say, okay, we're going to finance an income tax elimination by going out and borrowing a bunch of money in order to make all these payments on these other requirements that are out there for the state. So we're saying, look, we got the money to invest in that, to continue to reduce our debt and bring down the debt, which is going to free up recurring money through debt service elimination. I think in a couple of years, our debt service will drop about 60 to 80, maybe $100 million. So we're looking at freed up money that can be used for things that we need to do, additional investments in education, community colleges, IHL, child protective services, any of those things that requiring what you're seeing a lot of spending on in the last 3, 4, 5 years. It's been in corrections and some of these other things that there are some lawsuits out there. So we wanted to make sure that we were not going to run up a credit card bill in order to do something when we didn't have the money to do it.
So that's a good synopsis of the income tax aspect of it. Then we've got the general sales tax, no change in the Senate bill, right?
No change in general sales tax. We don't raise anybody's sales tax in any area, use tax or sales tax on anything to do this. We're going to let economic growth be the driver.
Groceries, sales tax on groceries, you're dropping that from 7 to 5. And would that go into effect
that
this
would go
July?
into effect immediately, yes, July 1.
New fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tax on fuel.
Tax on fuel, 3 cents a year for 3 years, and then it's indexed.
Starting when?
They would be after the final implementation of the last year of the 3-year implementation of 3 cents. So in 3 years, it would after that year, it would be every other year. It would be indexed according to the National Highway Construction Cost Index.
Okay.
So the cost of construction is what's going to index the gas tax. As it goes up, it'll go up a little bit. It can only go up a penny.
But the 3 cents per year, when does that begin? When does that
begins this July.
Okay, this that's what I thought. That's consistent with the original bill, right?
This version is the Senate plan with a trigger at the end of it.
Okay.
We didn't change up anything in our bill.
Except you included PERS.
Well, PERS, yeah, but I'm talking about as far as the taxes component of it. It didn't do anything. But PERS, that's an issue that we've got to address as part of this. You can't, we've talked about the unfunded liability, and we can't continue to kick that can down the road any longer.
Gotcha.
So that's part of it.
Gotcha. All right, we got a break right here. Senator Josh Harkins is our guest in the Element Wealth studio. Coming right back.
Now my advice for those who died, taxman, declare the pennies on your eyes, taxman, 'cause I'm the taxman, yeah. Taxman, and you're working for no one but me.
Rogers Dev. It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert. Come on, let's get on with the show! On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Senator Josh Harkins chairs the Senate Finance Committee. That's a little tequila there.
Very apropos.
Of course, we had Taxman bumping us out. You got some positive feedback on that one, by the way, Rhino, including from my good friend, Representative Fred Shanks in Rankin County. He says, good song choice. Appreciate that. So let's continue the discussion. Just contrast. Senate bill, House bill. I'll take a whack at it, then I'll shut up and let you talk. First thing is, the Senate bill does not increase the general sales tax. The House bill increases it from 7 to 8 over a 2-year period. Mm-hmm. The Senate bill does phase out the income tax based on achievement of certain financial metrics, so-called triggers. Does that incrementally based on economic growth, as you point out. The House bill doesn't have such a requirement. It just phases it out over a 10-year period in equal increments of 0.35 based now because they go from 4 to 3.5 instead of 4 to 3. Mm-hmm. So it's 0.35 increments over 10 years instead of 0.3. And then I think you guys are now aligned with respect to grocery sales taxes. Mm-hmm. 7 to 5. The diversion program that got kicked out of this, they got removed from the current version of the House bill. The diversion program that's in place today, policy, stays in place under the House bill. No change there. And then the gas tax. They're 5 cents. Their new draft, 5 cents per year over 3 years for a total of an increase of 15 cents per gallon. Yeah. And you guys are 3 cents for a total increase of 9.
That's indexed.
Okay.
I think theirs may have an index. I haven't seen the complete package of what they passed yesterday. It is different than the version they first sent out, so you'd have to go back and look at see what the diversions are, see if there's any, the grocery tax, all those things. I mean, we essentially passed our bill as it was, but added a trigger to it. And, And, we keep the cities whole. We keep all the other education enhancement fund budget whole. We keep the ad valorem tax reduction whole. So all those diversions that are in there are going to remain whole as it relates to the grocery tax reduction. But, in this conversation, Gerard, I think that one of the things that we talked about but we hadn't really focused on a whole lot is spending. I don't know. I'm not aware of very many proposals that cut really any spending in government.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen anything to that either, to that effect.
I think you're going to see, more of an effort, I think, to look at and try to find ways to make it more efficient. We always do that. We should try to do that. We should strive to do that all the time to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse that's in government. But nobody's proposed any major cuts to anything to help fund tax cuts. So, at some point, you're going to have to sit there and decide whether or not, cutting taxes is one that you're willing to cut some budgets and get rid of some things, or where are you going to look for the dollars? So, spending, tax credits, all these things are, appropriations and spending at the end of the day, whether you call it a tax credit or you call it an appropriation. But we're trying to do things that are going to put Mississippi in a position to be prosperous and going forward. And I'm all about doing this, but I think it's responsible. Fiscal responsibility is a part of conservatism. I think it's getting lost in the discussion sometimes. This plan takes into consideration our spending. It takes into consideration our revenues. And if there is an excess of revenue, that is what is going to warrant a cut in the income tax and benefit the working folks of Mississippi. That's what we want to do. We don't want to raise anybody's taxes to do it.
Are you concerned that the House's plan that doesn't require any sort of financial triggers, doesn't require requirements there, that might cause a problem? That's essentially what you're saying.
That's our concern. That's why we put triggers in it. If you try to run this out in a pro forma, I know pro formas are only worth the paper they're written on, but it's a good indication of where you may stand if history is an indicator of where you're going. I think it's what concerns us that we should do that. We should put triggers in if you're going to take this step of just continuously going out and trying to eliminate it.
Yeah. The House, though, doesn't seem to be in support of such a plan, best I can tell, Senator, that they would not support any plan that would require that the state pass through certain financial gates in order to continue to reduce the income tax. They just want to set that in motion and just have that be completely eliminated over a 10-year period.
Well, I believe that's a stark difference in the two sides and where we stand on the issue of how you eliminate taxes. I think that's absolutely the most important part of income tax cuts is how you cut. If you're going to cut a certain amount, do you front load it? Do you space it out? Do you try to absorb it naturally without having to raise sales taxes to do it? I mean, that's the discussion that we're having right now, and that's the thing that's proposed from both chambers. Is and it's like I said on your show at the beginning of the session. We can have the same goal in mind. We just have two different paths to get there, and which one do we feel like is a prudent, responsible way to get there? And I believe we put forward that plan. The Senate has diligently looked at and evaluated and run pro formas. We've had just constant discussions with Legislative Budget Office, Department of Revenue, state economists. I mean, we've taken every available resource and asset at the disposal of the legislature and the Senate to come up with a plan that is responsible. And I think this is what you have in front of you today is a responsible plan that does, quote unquote, put a plan in place to eliminate the income tax if our economy is performing. And I think any rational, reasonable person, I think, would also say that's a pretty good way to do it.
Talk about the proposed changes from your side to the rainy day fund.
Well, that's a good point. Right now our rainy day fund, our working cash stabilization fund, is done by a 10% of appropriations number. That's the maximum amount you can have in it is 10% of appropriation. And at the end of the year, any excess revenue goes through a split. 50% of it goes to working cash stabilization until that fund is full, and the rest goes to CapEx. Well, we've been pretty much close to being full the last several years. That's why you're seeing so much more money going into CapEx and available for CapEx projects at the end of the year. The Senate position is to change that to a percentage of revenue. 12% of revenue is essentially almost like going at a 13-14% of appropriation right now. So we're saying we're going to tie it to revenue and go to 12% right now and put money in through the CapEx fund to build it up. And then by 2030, when the triggers start to work, we would be at 13%.
Gotcha.
And that creates a healthy rainy day fund. We're probably one of the lowest in the country with the percentage of rainy day fund compared to our budget in the country. And I think you see a lot of states that are really building up their rainy day fund. And you don't want to take too much money out of the market, but you want to be in a position where you can weather a storm. And if you're going to eliminate one of your main sources of revenue, you better have a stable rainy day fund to weather any hurricanes or disasters or whatever may come up.
What's next?
We'll take the bill up on the floor here after lunch and proceed on.
And is the House, they're taking theirs up today too, are they not?
I think they were taking it up this morning.
Okay. So likely we're going to go to conference on this? Is that what you see?
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. Not sure what that means, but
I think that we've gotten to the point where we've got a plan in place that eliminates the income tax. It's done responsibly. It's got triggers that would necessitate a reason to cut because you have excess revenue, and then putting that back into the economy and giving a break to the working folks of the state is what we want to do, and we feel like we've got a good plan.
Okay. Well, the House does too. Seems like both sides kind of dug in here.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, look, that's why we sit here and we talked all session. And Chairman Lamar and I have worked a lot of hours. I know he's done a lot of work on it, and he's passionate about it. We're passionate about it, but we're also passionate about being right and trying not to cause any problems.
Yeah. Another difference that we can just chat about quickly is the PERS program.
Yeah.
Senator Sparks worked a lot, I know, on 2 or 3 measures that would contribute to stabilizing PERS, and it looks like the Tier 5 is probably the main one. That's been pulled forward, right?
Correct.
Into this legislation.
Into this legislation. And as the Tier 5, if Tier 5 is adopted, the new employees that go in there, the excess from their contribution would go to the unfunded liability. So
the employer contribution.
Yeah, the employer contribution. You're immediately putting extra money into unfunded liability just through the fifth tier.
The House, on the other hand, just dedicates the first $100 million of lottery proceeds to the PERS fund, just essentially transfers.
I think the
money.
Senate position is that the tiers we have right now are not sustainable. So there's fundamental reform needed in the tiers and moving forward. So it will be a sustainable program into the future for our employees and retirees.
Senator Josh Harkins chairs the Senate Finance Committee. He's been our guest. Always good to see you, Senator.
Thank you, Gerard.
Thanks, man. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the
interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Yes, I paid the phone bill too. And then I turned around and I found that the house notes due. Well, I'd love to take you out like I said I would, honey, but there's too much month at the end of the money. Well, I got a little
all right.
Ask of you, my love.
Okay, Rhino. You remember Johnny Carson's character, the great Karnak?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to play Karnak here. $100. What are the number of texts we have from Thomas in Greenwood at this point? What's the over and under on that? Oh, my gosh. Thomas, I'll just tell you, man, you're wrong. He's passionate to tote Delbert's water, unfortunately. I've spent a lot of time with members of both houses in private, and many of those conversations, as you can imagine, are private. And I'm not going to talk about them. But I will talk in general terms. There's no appetite in the Mississippi Senate to increase the general sales tax. There's no appetite to do that. And I know that many believe that it's possible to just implement a full-blown income tax elimination without increasing the other major source of revenue at the state level is relied upon, and that's sales tax. In fact, sales tax revenues actually exceed at the state level. After the diversion back to the cities, sales tax revenues exceed income tax revenues by about 10 percentage points, as I recall. 38 to 27, 28% of total revenue. Accounting for roughly 70% of total revenue in the general fund. So there's no appetite on the side of the Capitol where the Senate hangs out to pass any legislation that would include increasing the sales tax. Now, I'm on record as saying, and I am certainly not shying away from my position that in 2022, the bill introduced by the House, we've referenced it many times, that was promoted would have increased sales taxes across the board, not just on non-grocery items. But remember, in the House bill, that increase in the sales tax does not apply to all of those goods and services presently that are not taxed for sales tax purposes at 7%, such as vehicles and farm implements and manufactured housing, and I can't remember them all, Rhino, logging, and there's a series of other special sales tax goods and services. I thought that was a good bill because I believe as a conservative it's more efficient to tax consumption than it is work. And that bill would have allowed elimination of the income tax in a short period of time without a big risk to the revenue picture in the state. But it was met with all sorts of pushback from all of those groups primarily that have this special sales tax carve-out. And it was also pushed back by people, retired people in our state that don't pay income tax on their retirement income. And as I recall, working with at the time, Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn, we came back with something that would have mitigated that situation somewhat. And this is what makes it so hard in Mississippi is we already have low taxes. We already have a low income tax. We already have low sales taxes. We already have the 49th lowest fuel tax. So when you talk about cutting taxes from an already low level, I fully support that. And I'm pleased that our legislature, I believe, has been financially responsible. I wouldn't say that if we were borrowing money and weren't producing surpluses. Does that mean that there's not more room to cut? Well, of course there is. There always is. And we should be diligent in our efforts to do so. But some things are a little bit outside of our control, and first and foremost, that would be Medicaid. And what I mean by that is we rely heavily on the federal government to the tune of $7 billion a year. For the Medicaid program, our share just under $1 billion. 7/8 from the federal government, 1/8 from the state of Mississippi to pay for health care coverage under base Medicaid. Not even talking about Medicaid expansion, the new coverage group that came into existence in 2010 when the Affordable Care Act was passed. So, what we have here are two different approaches between the Senate and the House bill. And the Senate says we're not going to increase general sales taxes, but we're also not going to eliminate the income tax without some financial confidence. And they've actually codified that, if you will, with a calculation that would be applied that would trigger future cuts to the income tax rate based on that calculation. The House plan, it just does it automatically, assuming there will be sufficient growth in the state's economy. Now, from a state revenue perspective, that growth has to translate to consumption, because the majority of the taxes and the revenue produced by the state to fund general fund services would come from sales taxes, consumption. So when we talk about economic growth, we're not just talking about bringing in new projects, economic development projects. What are needed there are lots of spending from the project construction that generates sales taxes, although sometimes there are concessions provided for sales taxes to those businesses involved in those projects. But you need a bunch of new employees and new citizens that are going to go out and spend money to generate revenue to offset the loss of the income tax revenue, plus spending cuts. It's really hard to cut spending on programs such as Medicaid when you're under regulations that are promulgated by the federal government. You've got to meet certain minimum requirements to be in the program, and in exchange for that, you get a bunch of money from the federal government. I am concerned that the federal government, with this Doge fever and the framework passed in the U.S. House to cut $880 billion from by the committee that oversees the Medicaid program, I support honestly, cutting the Medicaid program because we're borrowing money to fund it is why. Everybody wants to cut the deficit and start getting close to a point where we can pay down the debt. I agree. Well, that means we got to cut spending, and I don't mean a little bit by a lot when you're producing $2 trillion deficits. The Medicaid program is a prime target for that purpose. At $620 billion a year of just federal spending, it's a prime target. Might make sense to phase out the federal Medicaid program, just like the Federal Department of Education. Send it back to the states. Let the states fund it, manage it. Now, yesterday, you recall Rhino Thomas made the comment that you typically hear from folks about these sorts of welfare and federal assistance programs. Hey, that's a matter for the churches. I'm all for that. Let's call the churches in the state of Mississippi and let them know you got to come up with $7 billion a year. And they get their money from the people. I don't think they could meet that need. Let's say, okay, we're just going to cut the Medicaid program in half. We're just going to tell 350,000 people in Mississippi, you're off the rolls. Okay, now you got to come up with $3.5 billion. You still can't do that. No doubt in my mind about that. Though I support that because we're borrowing money. Makes no sense. We're borrowing money to provide free health care. 56 cents of every dollar of federal spending outside of Social Security and Medicare is borrowed. Think about running your household like that, where more than half of your monthly expenses are borrowed. And the proof's in the pudding. $37 trillion in debt. And out of control still. With respect to tax reform here in the state of Mississippi, however, it means that we could see meteoric changes to the Medicaid program, which could cost the state of Mississippi a lot to remain in the program. We're coming right back with the final segment.
Hey, this is Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
When I think back on all the crap I learned in high school.
But welcome back, everyone. It's Middays, final segment. James in Hattiesburg asks, are there really 700,000 Mississippians on Medicaid? That's about a quarter of the population of the state. Sadly, yes. Little more than that, including children enrolled in the CHIPS program, but same deal, basically. And it turns out that from a percentage of total enrollees, the elderly, so the coverage groups don't really have time to dig into all the details of the Medicaid program, but it basically, just so you'll know, covers disabled individuals, blind people, elderly with very low incomes, pregnant women, and then children. The latter being the largest coverage group. However, the most of the expenditures, it's almost a reverse. It's like 65% pregnant women and children versus 35% elderly and disabled. Enrolled expenditures, it's almost the exact inverse. Adults and children, 35% of the expenditures, it's the elderly. No surprise there. The low-income elderly on Medicaid, nursing homes. And individuals with disabilities account for roughly 66% of the expenditures. But, yeah, it is roughly a quarter of our population, sadly. And the way to address that problem is to grow the state's economy and increase per capita and household incomes. Everything is addressed with economic growth. Schools, you want better schools, want better roads and bridges. Every bit of that comes from the affluence attained with economic growth, not public policy, not programs. That's what the Democrats think. Fix that with government. Wrong. Fix it with the private sector. Human innovation, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, investment. That's how you address these issues. Sadly, though, here in Mississippi, we are the poorest state in the country across a range of economic metrics, and that translates into having the highest Medicaid match from the federal government of all the 50 states at 77%. And it's sad to think that 56 cents of every dime they send us, of every dollar, they send us, is borrowed. We're too reliant on the federal government. That ought to be our goal. But I'm concerned about spending cuts from the federal government, how that would affect the state's financial picture. It would make eliminating the income tax a little bit more risky, just because even though I completely agree with everyone out there that says let's cut spending, I'm simply making the point that to comply with Medicaid regulations from the federal government necessary to receive the $7 billion they send us, you've also got to pay your part, and it makes it really difficult to cut. In fact, the lottery was supposed to be for the roads in Mississippi. Where's that money? It is $80 million in a $1.4 billion budget. It's a fraction of it. Somehow everybody gets this impression when you talk about proceeds from the lottery going to roads and bridges that, okay, that'll do it. It's $80 million of a $1.4 billion budget. So it turns out to be, about 6% there? And of the total spending, and according to folks that run the Department of Transportation commissioners, they need about $400 million a year just to keep pace. Lottery sends them 80. There was somebody that, here we go, said, I'm all for making sure people that are on Medicaid should be on it, but if you start reducing payments even more, already pay 50% or worse for most procedures to doctors, dentists, pharmacies, etc., it will create a huge access to care issue, loss of jobs for hospitals, etc. Other hospitals will continue to go under at a faster pace as well, which hurts all Mississippians. I hear you. I'm simply saying that I think the states ought to take a greater financial role in funding and designing a safety net health care program, and that not be dictated at the federal government. Yes, it means, and because we got to get the federal government's deficit down and start at least thinking about getting close to paying down the debt. I'm simply suggesting that if we're going to not touch Social Security, not going to touch Medicare, can't touch debt interest, not going to touch defense spending, in fact, we're going up on that under the Trump administration, we're running out of things. We're down to like 20% of the total spending, of which Medicaid is a big part of that. I'm simply saying that maybe it makes sense to start phasing that out, returning that to the states and letting the states design and run those programs and fund them. We're out of here today. Back with you again tomorrow at the Westin. Stay with us. Join us then. Stay safe and God bless.
Have you been seriously injured? Mama Justice is here for you. Our medical team partners with top-notch doctors, surgeons, therapists, and urologists, ensuring a comprehensive recovery journey. If you've been injured, call Mama Justice today. We're here for you.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Toyota of Brookhaven has been voted best new car dealership in Southwest Mississippi 4 years in a row. Come see the difference. Exit 40 Brookhaven or online at ToyotaBrookhaven.com. Great service, great savings. At Toyota of Brookhaven, we deliver.